What's up guys, it's Nick2, and today I'll be showing you guys what I think is overall the best Druid build in Season 4, which is going to be a nearly perfected Werewolf Tornado build. As you can see, the damage is still insanely good, easily being able to kill tormented bosses in just a few seconds, just absolutely nuking them. Not only that though, the build is actually really tanky, making it super easy to push into higher tiers of the pit, with the person that I pretty much copied this build from being able to clear a tier 116, which I'll leave a link to in the description if you're interested in checking that out. After spending just a couple days setting up the build myself, I'm able to easily clear pit 100 in about 4 to 5 minutes on average, absolutely just destroying all of the mobs with pretty much no risk of death, just a little bit. The only difficult part though is really just surviving all those boss mechanics, but if you can do that, you can just plow through T100s. My favorite part about the build though is that you can walk into lower tiers of the pit, around 80 to 90, and just completely plow through everything, speedrun like a madman, and that is the main reason that I recommend Tornado versus Wind Shear. Wind Shear can do a bit more single target damage, allowing it to clear like a couple tiers higher in the pit than Tornado really can, like I think it's at like 119 now, but in my opinion it feels very miserable, not fun really to play when just generally mobbing or doing any content outside of the pit. Hitting one mob at a time, I am just, no thank you. I do not have a fun time with that. Of course though, that is entirely subjective. If you like that build, obviously play that, but generally for most people I would recommend Tornado because it just works fantastically no matter what you're doing. If you're bossing, high tiers of the pit, speed farming, nightmare dungeons, helltide, etc., it's just a blast to play, and I'd highly recommend it if you want to play Druid this season. There'll be timestamps for everything in the description, so feel free to skip around, and of course the build link will be in the description as well. There's a couple things that I want to talk about and different versions that you can set up the build with. One of the main things I want you guys to take home though is there's a lot of ways to fix Spirit, and Spirit is one of the biggest problems that you'll have with this build. My cat is going crazy. Spirit is one of the biggest problems that you'll have with this build early on, so fixing that is really important. If you haven't played a Tornado Druid before, basically you use Tempest Roar so that your Tornado counts as a werewolf skill. This is so that you get a lot of synergies within the skill tree. It basically is just a damage increase. You can play without it, but getting Tempest Roar is very easy nowadays. You can go kill Duriel, or even doing the Wolf's Honor reputation. I got like 2 of those while leveling. Or you can just like go buy one on a trading website for like 10 million gold or something. Pretty easy to get. Outside of that, Tornado just does really good damage if you scale it. You get a lot of stuff within the skill tree, and it counts as a storm skill, so you can take advantage of the Thunderstruck Paragon node, giving you a disgusting amount of extra damage. You also get the brand new Temper, so Tornado has a chance to cast twice. By the way, look at this staff. Oh my goodness, this staff is so good. And we are using the Shepherd's aspect so that we get a crazy amount of extra damage per companion that you have. Personally, I don't think this is great design because most Druid builds are kind of just slapping companions on your bar now to get extra damage. You don't really use these skills. They're kind of just there to scale this up, which is the best way to scale your damage. Put on a two-hander so you get way more damage. I think you get about 180% extra damage when you pair it with Stampede, which is just unbelievably insane for one aspect to give you that much damage. Outside of that, we are using Maul. The reason for Maul is because we get a lot of extra damage within our skill tree and other synergies, which I'll talk about, such as Bestial Rampage, where when you are a Werebear for a couple seconds, you get a crazy amount of extra damage, and you can just swap in and out of Werebear and Werewolf pretty much whenever you want. Maul has the added benefit of an on-demand spirit generation, and it really helps you out with Fortify, but we will talk more about that. Defensively, Druid has a lot of stuff kind of just built in, giving you pretty good damage reduction, really nice healing, and you kind of just scale up your max HP to have a crazy amount of health. In my pure pushing setup, I have about 75k HP, and that is without perfect gear and missing a max HP roll on my boots. But if you had like absolutely perfect gear, I think 80k HP is pretty feasible, but this is more than enough for doing like tier 80s, etc. I'll talk about a lot of the unique options when we get into the gear. Real quickly, I want to mention all the ways that you can solve your Spirit. Spirit early on when you swap to the build is a huge problem. Real quick, I just want to demonstrate that I don't even have that much stuff for my Spirit right now, and I can just sit here and spam and I get my Spirit back permanently, and this is the same when it comes to bosses. One of the main reasons that I'm able to upkeep my Spirit right now is within the Paragon node, Lust for Carnage here. Anytime that you crit, you're going to regen Spirit, so the higher crit chance that you get, the better your Spirit regen will become. So once the build becomes more and more min-max, you will have less and less problems with Spirit. There's also a bit of Spirit on kill in here, but that is really only going to help you for mobbing. Outside of that, the only thing that I have on my gear is resource cost reduction on my two-handed staff, helps a ton, and then you want resource cost reduction as a temper via resource on your rings and your amulet. I have resource gen, that is not ideal, but that is really all I have for solving my Spirit personally. If you're just swapping to the build and you're having some struggles, here are some pretty easy things that you can do to kind of solve the problem or mitigate it while you're first setting it up until you're able to get it kind of more min-maxed. You can use an elixir of resourcefulness. I don't have one, but they're very easy to craft, 20% resource cost reduction, and gives you some max spirit. That is really nice. Oh, I forgot to mention, I have spirit per second on my boots as well, so that is my other source of generation, which is really, really helpful. If you don't have a unique chest, you can also get spirit per second on your chest. Just while leveling, that will help you a ton. Another thing you can do, which is pretty low downside, is you can swap Blood Howl from Preserving to Innate. So anytime you pop Blood Howl, it generates spirit. And Blood Howl has a really low cooldown while you're mobbing, so you can just spam this for a decent bit of spirit generation. Another thing you can do is use Ring of Starless Skies. Technically, this is a damage loss to use, but if you don't have other good rings, you can definitely swap this on, and it makes the build extremely comfy spirit-wise. Of course, it isn't uber unique, but if you happen to have it, you're just swapped into the build, this will pretty much solve your problems by itself. Other ways that we're getting spirit is with our boon, Energize. Dealing damage has a chance to restore some spirit. And Tempest Roar also has that built into it. This is a decent bit of spirit generation, but it isn't insane. But our Tornado does have okay lucky hit because it is ticking constantly. Two other things you can do if you are still unbelievably down bad is you can swap into the Paragon node Inner Beast. You could just swap to this real quickly. Gives you a bit of spirit cost reduction. It'll help you early on. It comes at a pretty significant damage loss, but if you're really struggling, feel free to do that. Another thing you can do is you can use Aspect of the Umbral here. So anytime you CC an enemy, you restore some resource, and you're going to be constantly crowd controlling via poison effects slowing and also tempering effects on your gear, having a chance to stun or whatever you're able to get on there. As an absolute last-ditch effort, you could use Tibalt's Will in tandem with the Metamorphosis boots, and this will give you a bit of resource, but it does come at a loss in terms of armor and resistances. It'll make it way harder to cap out on those. That's all the ways that you can solve your spirit, and if you employ 60% of those things, or even you just have what I have on, you should be perfectly fine. Obviously, try to find the sweet spot. Don't overcommit on a lot of these things, but if you're just swapping to the build, there's a lot of really low-cost things you can do to kind of fix your spirit, and I promise you it will become a non-issue once you have the build set up pretty well. Also, you can use an axe instead of a staff. The damage output is about the same, but an axe has a lower attack speed, meaning that it will drain your spirit slower, but you'll still get roughly around the same amount of damage. Now let's get into the skill tree. So we want to use Maul, like I said, for the Fortify, spirit generation rather, and it counts as a Werebear skill, and we can constantly just pop in and out for a lot of damage and damage reduction oriented stuff. Tornado, chance to apply vulnerable, really good. This thing is useless because we are slowing enemies anyways. Wild Impulses for extra damage, and then Iron Fur is DR anytime we pop out of Werebear form, and we're constantly popping in and out, so we pretty much just have 9% DR there. Predatory Instinct is just crit chance, and Digitigrade Gate is fantastic for movement speed, so you could swap out of Iron Fur into that if you want. Ancestral Fortitude is nice for capping your resistances. It's pretty hard without using this, and I'll talk a bit about resistances. Vigilance is fantastic when you pair it with Blood Howl, just 15% DR a lot of the time. When you're fighting bosses, you want to time this properly, but otherwise you'll have this up permanently, and we go into Blood Howl attack speed. Wolves, 1 point, Poison Creeper, 1 point, literally just to get the bonus from Shepherds, and then Ravens, we go into it just to get 2 additional Ravens, so we have 4 Ravens there, 3 Wolves, and 2 Poison Creepers. Then we go into Neurotoxin, so poisoned enemies are slowed, and all of our Tornadoes are going to apply poison via Toxic Claws, and then also going to apply slow. And then because they're poisoned, we get Envenom, which is a crazy amount of extra damage. As you can see, I have 9 ranks of this, so almost double my crit damage, which is really, really huge there. And then Defiance is just extra damage to elites. Circle of Life is really good healing. Natural Disaster is damage against crowd-controlled enemies if they're stunned or immobilized. This is more for mobbing, but if you're fighting bosses, go into Resonance there. That's just extra damage, but it's a little bit on the lower end. And then Quick Shift is nice, 18% damage that you can keep up all the time. Natural Fortitude is great for Fortify uptime. Swapping in and out of Werewolf, Human, and Werebear just helps you with your Fortify. You could alternatively swap out of this if you don't want it, but I think it is helpful for consistency. And Heightened Senses is just DR and movement speed. And of course, Bestial Rampage, 30% attack speed perma and 50% increased damage perma. You can very easily get the damage increase. You just want to make sure to swap into Werebear every once in a while, and you can see that you have the damage increase. And it's based on server tick, so you don't actually have to stay in there for 2 seconds if you know how to time it properly. But honestly, when you're fighting mobs, you just want to make sure to swap into Werebear every once in a while. Kind of just, blast, 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 swap into Werebear. Blast, 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 swap into Werebear. This makes it so you keep up your Quick Shift, keep up your Fortify, and you always have this 50% damage increase, which is really insane. And if you bind stand still, I don't know if you can do this on controller, let me know, but you can bind on PC. I'll show you the controls here. You can bind hold position, and if you bind hold position, press that, and then press your basic skill, you can press it without actually having an enemy to target, so that is particularly helpful for being able to maintain this outside of combat. Anytime I leave a group of mobs, I pretty much just press this so I can walk into the next group with full uptime on that. When it comes to legendaries and some uniques, I'll talk about some options. Of course, Shepherd's on the two-hander, Retaliation on the amulet for increased damage. You want to make sure to keep up your Fortify for 45% increased damage all the time. Stampede, really good. I believe you get about 80% increased damage just from using this, or it's either 60 or 80. So that is very nice. And then this is where you can change this depending on preference. Changeling does crazy damage if you're just mobbing, but of course bosses don't really get crowd controlled unless they are staggered. So this doesn't help for bossing, but it is really nice for speed farming. So swap this to accelerating if you want to do more damage against bosses, or if you're trying to do higher tiers of the pit, because that's where bosses are really more of a problem. But this will give you more overall damage. And then, of course, you want Storm Chasers. As you can see, I don't have a max Storm Chaser or a max Changeling, so maybe that shows you I haven't played my Druid a ton. And then when it comes to your other stuff, you want Metamorphosis on boots. This is crazy good. It's your only form of Unstoppable, so you pretty much need it. But if you get attacks reduce evade cooldown, you can pretty much just spam your Unstoppable because you can get really high attack speed with your Tornado. So as you can see, I'm just reducing the cooldown on it really, really nice. And you can pretty much permanently have Unstoppable as a result of that. So that is really good. You want Might for just 20% damage reduction. And then let's talk about uniques. Mad Wolf's Glee is great for damage. It gives you, on 3 ranks, should give you about 16 to 18% increased damage, depending upon how many ranks of Tornado you have on your gloves. And it is decent defensively too, because it has max HP and DR from poison. So you're not losing much survivability by using this versus a normal chest. So overall, I would recommend it. It makes hitting armor cap a little bit difficult, because then you need to get armor on your pants and temper armor. Alternatively, Tyrell's Might, I would say, is overall better because it gives you a ridiculous amount of survivability, max resistance. It makes hitting your resist caps very easy, and you get DR, and the all stats is pretty good too for Paragon nodes. Of course, you need a Tempest Roar. That is a no-brainer. Let's talk about the other unique options. So Hunter Zenith is great for using Debilitating Roar. Basically, if you use Hunter Zenith, anytime you get a kill, your Debilitating Roar will have no cooldown, so then you can get 70% DR all the time. 2 things with this. Personally, I found that you don't need this DR while you're mobbing. You are actually perfectly fine, and the only time that you need DR is really when bossing, and when you're bossing, you can't get a kill to permanently spam Debilitating Roar. Also, if you use Debilitating Roar as your way of going into Werebear, it is a little bit less consistent because you have to get a kill after using it, and a lot of the time you will want to swap into Werebear, but you can't because you don't want to force the skill on cooldown. So then you'd want to have Maul on your bar anyway, and it becomes a little clunky. You also lose a significant amount of damage using Hunter Zenith rather than just using a normal ring. So generally for most people, I straight up would not recommend Hunter Zenith because it has 0 value on bosses. When you are mobbing, you are tanky enough and you want to have damage. You're going to lose a legendary aspect, and because damage to close is such a massive multiplier for us, you're going to lose that. You're going to lose crit chance, attack speed, and you'll lose max HP. So overall, I would not recommend it, and it is actually harder to play with than just playing with Maul. Maul helps you with your Fortify, on demand get any of the buffs that you want via shapeshifting, and it's just really easy to play with, and it also helps with your Spirit Gen. If your Spirit Gen is really weak, just press Maul a couple times and you're chilling. Go back to full Spirit. Next unique is Ring of Starless Skies. This is really sick, however, you do lose some damage by using it, and the reason for that is because you lose a damage aspect, and you lose the temper damage to close, which again converts into a multiplicative bonus here via Thunderstruck. You get 20% of that value as a multiplicative bonus in addition to the additive bonus there. So you're already outweighing the benefit of the 40% damage via Starless Skies by simply just having that temper. You'll lose attack speed and you will lose max HP or willpower depending on what you go for, but you gain the 40% resource cost reduction, which is really comfy, but you also lose a damage aspect. So, you know, it really depends. If you want to use this just for the resource cost reduction, definitely feel free, but with a perfect setup, it is a damage loss. The main benefit, I would say, is that it gives you double 10% all-res, which makes hitting your all-res caps very, very easy. The next unique I want to talk about is Wildheart Hunger. I absolutely freaking hate these. One of the biggest things is that with this build, if you use these, you're not going to have Unstoppable. It is a crazy damage increase, but It's really annoying to play with because you constantly have to shift in and out of werebear form, and it also is based on server ticks, so sometimes it will simply just bug out and not give you the stacks, and you have to remain within these forms, constantly swapping between them to keep the buff, and it is really cumbersome to play around. So for most people, straight up wouldn't recommend it, and not having Unstoppable is really difficult to play around. You don't need the damage. If you want to hit the highest numbers possible, definitely use this if you want to, but personally, like, I just would not recommend it to most people at all. You lose spirit per second, you lose movement speed on your boots, being able to temper, you lose max HP, you gain DR to close, and you gain some damage. Feel free to play with it, but overall, would not recommend it. That is all of your uniques and stuff. Let's talk about what stats you want on your gear and how you can hit resistance cap. Personally, I'm not resistance capped, but I'll talk about how you can do it pretty easily. I am resist capped super easily, though, when I use Tyrael's Might, which is what I generally recommend for most people. Tempest Roar, obviously. Mad Wolf's Glee, if you want a normal chest, you can get the aspect damage reduction when you are a werewolf form, and then you just want like max HP, you can get spirit per second, willpower, that would be pretty good, and you can temper like some defensive stuff. But generally, Mad Wolf's Glee is what I'd recommend for most if you don't have Tyraels. Gloves, you want crit chance, that's the most important thing, or sorry, ranks of tornado, most important, and then crit chance, then attack speed, and make sure to temper damage to close. And then for your lucky hit, you want lucky hit chance to stun or freeze. That is really, really nice, but ideally stun. And then on the pants are super important. Try to get GA max life, and if you get GA armor, it's super easy to hit your armor cap. So I'd really recommend that, and then you get total armor percent. If you don't get GA armor on your pants and your gear is not masterworked, you will need to get armor on your boots, but this can kind of swap around based on what you're doing. But my armor is perfectly fine here. But if you use Tyrael's Might and then you were to swap in skulls here, it makes hitting that armor cap easier. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing for you guys, but just try to get the GA armor on your pants if you can, then temper armor. And then, of course, max HP and willpower is great, and lucky hit chance to stun, and of course, get Might here. Forgot to mention this, if you don't have Tyrael's Might on your pants, you actually don't want the willpower here, you want to have resistance to all elements. As you can see, I am not resistance capped because I usually run around with Tyrael's Might, but I wanted to play with the normal build without any uber uniques to show you guys that it's perfectly fine and it's still very good, but you need the resistance to all elements on the pants here in order to reach your resistance caps. That plus the Paragon board will get you there. On the boots, there's a couple different things you can do. Generally what I'd recommend is spirit per second, max HP, and then armor if you need the armor, or movement speed. I really like movement speed for speed farming. I don't have max HP, but if you get GA max HP boots, I thought I had some in my inventory, but I guess not. But that is a huge HP increase, so really recommend that. On the staff, try to get an axe or a staff. Axe is probably preferable for most people. You'll see bigger numbers, and it'll help you with your spirit because you are fighting or attacking slower, and you want to get max HP, willpower, and resource cost reduction. If you want more damage, you don't need the resource cost reduction, but I think it helps a lot. Damage to close enemies, and as you can see, I got the triple masterwork on the perfect chance to cast Tornado. That is unbelievably nice. Probably the best item on my account. I really like this. On your rings here, if you want survivability, go for the max HP GA. This, you can actually get a ring like this for like 10 mil on auction. I found it. You can get like crit chance GA, max HP. That's really, really nice. And then you can get the attack speed there, damage to close, and try to temper resource cost reduction. And try to make sure that the damage to close is a high roll. And on these pieces, you want the masterwork to either land on crit chance or damage to close. That's the biggest damage increase you can get there. If you don't want max HP, you can go for willpower for more raw damage, but the max HP is really, really nice for survivability because it scales off your percentages. And then for the amulet, straightforward, you want Envenom, try to get it greater affix and crit chance and attack speed, damage to close, and resource cost reduction. I didn't go over the spirit boons, but you just want to go for damage reduction from elites, and then at maximum HP and crit damage. If you want to do more damage, you can swap off the max HP for the crit chance here. That's generally better for most people. Attack speed's okay, but the crit chance is going to edge it out a little bit, depending upon how many Envenom ranks you have. And then Energize is the only thing that is even remotely decent here. And Masochistic, same thing. It'll just give you a little bit of healing. Everything else here is just completely useless. So there you go. You can go here and you can craft the Soothing Spices, which will give you 10% all res. So it makes it very easy to cap, of course. Constantly popping this every 20 minutes is pretty annoying, but if you masterwork the pants, get the all res there, it's super easy to reach it. There's also some stuff you can do in the Paragon board to reach it. Real quickly, I'll just do a tier 80. Typically, I like to run with my Tyrael's Might, but if I want to do like a lower tier, do a little bit more damage, then Mad Wolf's Glee is really nice. and I'll just do a lower tier just to show you guys how easily you can just absolutely nuke everything and how to play with the build. Generally, it's really easy to play. The only thing you need to make sure to do is just press small every once in a while for a significant amount of damage reduction. You get the Aspect of Might, so you want to press it every 7 seconds. You get the damage reduction via the Paragon board, or sorry, the normal skill tree with Iron Fur, and you get all the Fortify, etc. So what I like to do when I first walk in is kind of just press small a few times. I feel like everything's doing way more damage than normal, but whatever. Press small a few times so that I can build up my Fortify. Once my Fortify is built, then I kind of just run around and you, like, look, you just nuke everything. And when I go from pack to pack, I like to just manually maul so that I can maintain that damage reduction, the damage increase via Bestial Rampage there. So, like, for example, I kill this pack and then I can just manually press maul, boom, go into Werebear. The only thing that I really swap when I go into the speed farming version of the build is I like to put on Exploit Glyph. When you are normally like doing high tiers of the pit, you don't really need Exploit, you need as much damage as you can get. But when you're speed farming, you want to get that vulnerable application instantly. As you can see, boom, manually maul, get my damage increase there. And while you're fighting, you want to make sure to maul as well for that increased damage reduction via might. And also the quick shift stuff. That's pretty much it. If you want to CC, you can like press Poison Creeper, I guess. It's kind of bad because like you want the mobs to be stacked up a little bit, so it doesn't really do anything. And pressing the other skills, I'm pretty sure does absolutely nothing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty sure they don't do anything. Otherwise, I press Blood Howl for the damage reduction, pretty much on cooldown, and for the permanent attack speed increase. And yeah, maul it up. Maul it up, tornado it up, and that's pretty much it. Build is pretty tanky. I'd recommend most people probably farming around 75s to 80s if you just want to like turn your brain off, don't really have to worry about anything. That is pretty good. And of course, if you want to like you don't really need the damage from Mad Wolf's Gleat at all, and you don't really need the movement speed either. So I would highly recommend Tyrell's Might because the DR that you get from it is insane, like getting maximum resistances. And then if you could temper max resistance as well, that is like just crazy good. You can pretty much survive most boss mechanics that way. The only problem that this build really has is just surviving boss mechanics, but that's kind of most builds nowadays because for some reason the difficulty in the pit is like insanely backloaded. And it's pretty much just, can you survive the boss? Okay, you survive the boss. How much boss damage can you do? Can you kill it in 5 minutes? Okay, GG. That's pretty much the pit right now. So most builds have a decent enough time when it comes to mobbing. As you can see though, we got there really, really quickly, pretty much on pace with like Bash Barb in terms of like a tier 80 at least. Your damage is not like absolutely insane, but I would say it is pretty good. Like, you're not doing as much as people were doing on PTR, but it's really nice. And when you're bossing, just make sure to maul to keep up your Fortify. The boss will do decent damage. And make sure to maul if you anticipate a boss mechanic hitting you. And you can save your Blood Howl for when you think a boss mechanic will hit you too, because you will get the 15% DR from pressing Blood Howl. As you can see though, that guy pretty much just got completely owned. Super, super easy to go into a lower tier. But make sure to press your Blood Howl, like save it for an attack, because you're not going to get the permanent cooldown reduction there when you're fighting normal mobs. Or sorry, when you're fighting a boss, because you're not killing stuff, so you get the 15% DR there. Here is a tier 100 that I did. Did it in about 4 or 5 minutes with better gear, etc. Oh my goodness, sorry you had to hear that. With better gear, etc., you could do it in, you know, probably 3-4 minutes if you had like perfect gear. Honestly though, my gear is pretty nice, and the damage is just, it's really nice. I really like how much damage you can do. But 4 to 5 minutes tier 100, I would say that's pretty good. If you like the video, feel free to drop a like, subscribe. Definitely check out Anlavin. I'm hopefully pronouncing that correctly. He did a T116 or Pit 116. Guy's an absolute gamer. That's probably where Tornado caps out, to be honest. Leave a link to that in the description. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.